Shubha, are you here, Shubha?
Yes, Tanvi, I'm here.
Yeah, Shubha, I just opened your email. I'm just checking your what you want me to. I did not figure out the below requirements. Male, female radio button required. Calendar selected date needs to display in the date label. Checkbox list multiple selection and required validation. Get button. So all these examples are already there. I have already provided you these examples.
Yeah, I tried.
In the custom validator and custom validator one.
Yeah, I saw that one, but I don't know how to do the requirement validation for the checkbox list.
Okay.
I
So
tried.
other than this, are you able to do other than checkbox list and radio button?
Yeah, other than that, I did that one, so that's why I attached my 2 files there. So once the class is over, if you have time, give me some suggestions, Tanvi.
Shubha, I will email you because once the class is over, actually I will have to go to drop my son to school. So that's the only thing. Yeah. But I will email you whatever your problems are.
Okay. That will be great. Thank you.
Okay, anything else, guys? Anyone else? Okay, so shall we begin? So we are going to start with ADU.NET. Anyone, what is ADU.NET? Anyone heard of it? ADU.NET? Kasturi?
Hi, Tanvi. Kirti here.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, Kirti.
Yeah. It's like when we have to connect to the database, SQL Server or Java, or Oracle, any of the databases through our application. So we do it using this ADO.NET classes, which are predefined. We can directly use all those classes and connect to the database and do all the functionality like insertion or deletion or updating, etc. What are all the SQL operations which we have to do.
Great. So if you guys remember, the other day we used one control, SQL data source. SQL data source control. The other day we used where we had this class of ASP.NET Server controls. With this control, what we did, we got data from our database to our application side, right? In a data list. Everyone remember this? From DB, from the database, we got the data in our application through this control. Okay, so these are few controls also available which we can use. These are basically making things automatic for us. When we use this control, it created a connection string automatically and added in our web.conf. Okay, but many things will be there, like we need to execute stored procedures, or we need to do some complex things. Everything is not possible or will not be possible through these kind of controls. Okay, these are good for small purpose, small amount of data interaction if you are doing with the database. So ADO.NET is the technology to communicate with the database. Okay, so in .NET framework, you have already defined namespaces, collection of classes, tools, so that you can connect to the database, you can update the database, you can delete something from the database, and you can retrieve something from the database. Whatever operations can be done on the database. Okay, so it is a set of tools and predefined namespaces. So we don't have to do hard work. We don't have to write everything from scratch. We don't have to write the code to create a connection to the database. Okay, so we don't have to do this hardcore programming. We have to just use the classes, open the connections, run the commands, and very abstract things we have to do. Okay, everyone is familiar with how to create a table in a database? Everyone knows here? If you want to create a table in SQL Server database, anyone has problem with it?
Why nobody is talking? Somebody can answer it.
Okay. They are basically replying.
This is Pushpan.
Yeah,
Plus, so many people are there in the call, so nobody is ready to answer anything.
No, Pushpan, they are writing in the chat actually.
Oh, okay. But are you okay with that, Tanvi?
Yeah, I'm perfectly okay.
Okay, all right. So who all are not there today except Anita?
Everyone is here except Aarti. She will join in another 20 minutes, she said.
Who?
Aarti.
Anita, okay.
She sent me an email that her son's birthday is today, so she will join a little late.
Okay. All right. Okay, you carry on, Tanvi.
Yeah, sure. So I will not focus on how to create a table in the database. Everyone knows it. So now, how we can divide broadly ADO.NET? We can divide it in 3 major steps or categories. The one thing will be the physical data store. 3 layers will be there. Physical data store. It can be any data store. It can be OLE database, your Access, MS Access, even Excel. It can be SQL database. It can be a flat source also, like XML file. So with ADO.NET classes, you can fetch or you can communicate with any kind of physical data store. There are different providers for it. For each and every data store, there will be a different provider, or basically in our programming term, there will be a different namespace. But here, our focus will be SQL Server, because this one is the most popular, which is used with the .NET always. Then second layer again, data provider. So data provider consists of connection object, command object, and provides the connection between the data store to our application. Ultimately, with the ADO.NET, what we want to do is we want to connect. One is our database. Data is stored here. One is our application, which user can access. Okay. So when a user submits a form, insert data, where do we insert? In a data store. Okay. Whenever user is requesting something, we get it from the data store. So this is the kind of connection we need. So data provider is the intermediate stage which is providing this kind of connection. Okay. So how? Because there's some objects, connection object, command object. So through those objects, it is providing this kind of connection so that we can access the database. Now in our application, whenever we are accessing the database, we are getting the data. The general need is to store the data somewhere. Okay. So to store the data somewhere, generally there are other methods also, but mostly this is being done in the data set. So data set is in memory, representation of the tables and relationship. So in memory means in your application memory. So data set resides here in application. So whenever you are fetching data from the database, you are storing it here in the data set. Okay. So these are the 3 layers. This data set structure or architecture is exactly like database. So in the database, what do you have? A database. Then within the database you have table. Within the table you have columns and rows. Columns collection, rows collection. This exact same architecture is of the data set. Okay. And I'll go in detail with every stage, with every layer. Guys, so far any question, any doubt? Anyone has any question? We'll move on. You can see these are the 3 layers. First is the physical data store, where actually we are storing the data. Another one is data object, DataSet Object at the application side, where we are actually fetching the data from the database and storing it in our application. And then this is the data provider objects, connection object, data adapter objects. There are more objects as well. Okay. So this is how the architecture of ADO.NET will be in our application. These are the different data providers which are used in the ADO.NET based on the data source we are using and based on the protocol that data source is basically using. So there is ODBC. Okay, so it is for the older databases. Establish connection for the older databases. OLEDB, like if we are using Access, MS Access or Microsoft Excel, so we can use OLEDB provider. For Oracle, if we are using Oracle as a database, we use Oracle data provider. Then this is which is for us, SQL data provider. If we are using SQL Server, so this is the provider we want to focus on. So these are different providers based on the different protocols data sources using, and using the same protocols, our application is, our .NET framework has enabled all these providers, or basically written these providers. Okay, so these are different data provider objects: connection object, command object, DataReader object, DataSet object. This is the application where dataset will be, and these are different databases. Okay, so these providers are basically ultimately communicating with these databases through their objects. Okay. Now, this entire thing, we can, these three layers, we actually call them a different tier. We call them three-tier architecture. What this three-tier architecture is, one is data tier or data layer basically, where the database is. Another one is business tier. Business tier is where data from data tier is coming to your application in memory, only in memory. User cannot see it. Okay, so data set is something which can hold data, but user cannot view it. Okay, like when you write integer a equal to I, a equal to 12. Okay, so it is like that a is holding 12. But until you do print value of a, or you are doing something or printing it in some label or Xbox, you cannot view it. It just holds it. Okay, the same is true with data set. When the data is within the data set is holding the data in tabular kind of structure, but user cannot still view it. Okay, that is the business layer. So in the business layer, fetching data or updating data from data set to database, or from database to dataset, both ways. Okay. Then in the presentation tier is our forms or pages, which user can see, user can view, and user can work with. Okay. So in our forms, we add some controls like data controls. The other day we used data list, drop down list, list box, data grid, grid view, all these controls. Now what we can do? From these data sets, we bind data to these controls. This is what is presentation tier. Once the data set data has been bounded to these controls, user can view the data now. A normal user who is accessing the application can view the data. This is what the presentation tier is. Everyone clear? Any questions so far? Anyone, any question? Okay, we move on. Okay, this is what the dataset object is. We will need this very frequently, dataset object, whenever we want to communicate to the database. So one dataset object is basically collection of tables. So you will have ds.tables like this, right? This is a collection of tables. Now how to access a table with the index 0, 1, 2, 3. The similar way you access any collection. Okay. Then table has rows and columns. Okay. So if you will do this dot rows, you will have rows collection. Okay. And then columns, dot columns collection. So if you want to access the first row, 0 index. If you want to access the first column, 0 index. Okay. So this is what the dataset object is. We'll see all these things programmatically, how to work with them. So each dataset, one dataset can hold multiple data tables, as I said, it is a collection of data table. Now in each data table, there is a collection of rows and columns. Each row is an object of data row class, and each column is an object of data column class. Okay. Now within these tables, we can have relationship, we can have constraints, foreign key constraints. Okay, like we have in the database.
Yeah.
Is anyone talking? Yeah, Pushpan. You want to speak something, Pushpan? Okay, maybe he's in another call. So these are two namespaces which we will need to work with or to communicate with the database in AV.NET. So system.data, we will need data set, data table, data row, data column, and if we want to establish relationship or constraint, so data relation and foreign key constraint. So these are the namespaces which we need to use. Now these we don't need, these also we don't need because we are using SQL Server as a provider. So this is what we will need. System.data.SQL client namespace. So two namespaces we have to include. System.data. When we use system.data namespace, it will include data set, data table, data row, data column, data relation, and all these classes, and we can use it. Now when we include system.data.SQL client, it will include SqlConnection, SqlCommand, SqlDataReader, SqlDataAdapter, all these classes which we need. So we need basically two namespaces, system.data and system.data.SQL client. Okay, how to use these namespaces? The similar way, using statement, using system.data, using system.data.SQL client. Okay, now what objects are there and what do they do? So first object is connection. With the connection, this is connection object is basically object of SqlConnection class in our case because we are using a SQL Server as a database. SqlConnection class, what it does, it connects to the data source. Okay, so whenever we want to communicate with the database, these are two different processes running in your machine. Okay, one is application, one is database. Okay, so before communicating, before fetching or updating, the first thing is you will have to open a connection to the database. Okay, which will be done through the connection object. Okay, then now what we want to do, actually communicate, and how we can communicate? We can communicate by executing different kind of commands. Those are SQL commands. SQL commands we want to execute, like select. Select is a command which can select from the database, project from the database, fetch from the database. Insert. Insert can insert something in the database. Update. Whatever is already there, with the update, we can update the value, update the record. And delete. Whatever is already there, we can completely, permanently delete it. So these are the main 4 things which we want to do in the database. Those can be done through the command object. Every one of you, are you guys familiar with the SQL statements, SQL language, like select all from table, insert into, all these statements? Okay, great. Okay. Then there is data reader. If we don't want to update database, delete database, and we don't even want to store something which we are fetching from the database, we just want to access it once. So we have a data reader object. It is a forward only, read only stream of data. Okay, how it does? It reads line record by record. So first record it will read, second record it will read. If the first record is finished, then there is no way you can again access it. So if you want to store your data, you will have to, you will have to use the command object. You will have to execute select statement, select query on the database through the command object. But if you don't want to hold the data, you want to just once read it, you can use DataReader Object. DataReader Object will be SqlDataReader class object. Then the data adapter. Now we are saying that we want to hold data in the database. Okay. And we want to hold data in the data sets in our application side. Okay. So this is data adapter, is the intermediate thing which connect a data set to a data source. So this is a database. We are fetching data from database to data set. And who is actually doing it? Data adapter. So intermediate our data set and database, we have data adapter. Okay. Even for update, we want to update something from data set to database, so we can have data adapter again in between. So whatever interaction you are doing to data sets, data adapter will be mandatory. This will work as a bridge between the data set and database. Anyone, any questions? Guys, I'll be back in a minute. Yeah, I'm back. So these are radio.NET objects. So data set is one object. So then data set, data table is another object. Then data table, data row collection, data column collection. In here in the data providers, this is application side, application wide data set object. This is provider object, which is in the SQL client class system dot data dot SQL client. So these are the object. Connection object. It opens the connection, closes the connection, as well as handles transaction also. We'll see this in what is transaction. Command. It executes command like select, insert, update, and we can use parameters. We can pass parameters while executing these commands. And data reader, it can read from the database. And data adapter also can execute all these commands, but it will whatever data it is getting, it will fill in the data set. Okay. So it is the bridge between the data set and the database. Okay. So connection object, again creating connection to the database, and this is the class. Now, when you are creating the connection to the database, there are two methods. One is the explicit method, another one is the implicit method. With the explicit method means you have to open the connection explicitly by calling the open method of SqlConnection class. What you will do, you will create the object of this class. Let's say this is the object, so object.open. This is the explicit method. Another method is implicit. Implicit is when we are using data adapter, SQL data adapter in between. So we don't have to call this open method. Okay. So whenever you are using SQL data adapter, and when you will fill the data in the data set, the automatically adapter will first open the connection, then fill the data in the data set, and then automatically will close the connection. Okay. So two methods. One is explicit, which is we have to call the open method, and another one we don't have to call the open method. We'll see all this programmatically. And other than this opening and closing of connection, this can handle transactions also. Now to open a connection to the database. The other day we used a SQL data source. When we drag this control on the form, and what we did, we created a connection string, right? So connection string is nothing but your database information in string format. Okay, not in any format, but there is a predefined specific format in which we have to provide our database information. Okay, so while creating our SqlConnection object also, so this is how we create SqlConnection class object. This is a connection object, and we have to pass connection string. Okay, this is a connection string. This is a connector string. This is the specific format of the connection string, and this is the format we have to follow. The first one is when you have installed SQL Server and it is in Windows authentication mode. So whenever our SQL Server is Windows authentication mode, you will see there is no separate username and password. But whatever username and password is for our Windows operating system, it works with the same credentials. Okay, so the connection string is this. Okay, which is integrated security. Integrated security is it is using the security mechanism of your operating system. Okay, another connection string format is when your SQL Server is in SQL Server authentication mode. So basically there is a separate set of username and password. In this format you have to provide data source. The same thing, data source is your database server. It can be IP, it can be your database server. Okay, and when we are working on local, it can be local. Okay, initial catalog is your name of the database. Okay, on the database server you can have multiple databases. So a specific database which you are working with in your application, that name of the database. Then as I said, it is in SQL Server authentication mode. So there is a separate user ID and password. So user ID and password. This is the connection string format, and only in this format we have to provide our connection string while creating the SQL connection object. Okay, so these are the connection string parameters names which we have already discussed. So data source which identifies the server, initial catalog, database name, integrated security. Okay, if we are using the security of Windows login, Windows operating system, user ID, SQL Server user ID, password, SQL Server password. Anyone, any question here, any doubt? Okay, we'll move on. Now next is command object. Once the connection is open, now this line is open from your database to application. This is open. Connection has been created. Okay. Now line is open, but still you have to get data or you have to update data. So for that, what you need to submit your queries on the database through this connection, right? So your queries should be executed like select all, select whatever data from table name. This is SQL query syntax. SQL is another like a language which your SQL Server database understand. So SQL Server database understands SQL query language. So we have to execute our query in that language only. So select all from name, whatever table. Let's say I have a student table. So select all from student. Now this statement we have to execute on this server. So this we will do with the command object. So we have SQL command object. Now you can pass input parameters and fetch output parameters while executing the command. So you may have command like select all from student where name equal to something. Okay. So you are passing, you may want to pass name as a parameter. Name equal to something, this is coming from the application, this parameter. So for that you have input and output parameters. Now this will return some record or a record. These are the two records which has name as this, whatever the parameter has been passed. So what to do with that record? Two things you can do. Either you just read it once through the data reader object, or you store it in your application within dataset through the DataAdapter Object. Okay, so these are the two ways you may want to access your data returned from database. This is how programmatically you create a SQL command object, SQL command object name, now new SQL command. Now with the command, what you are actually doing is executing some command. So in the constructor, the first parameter what we are passing is a string. Okay, and this string is nothing but a SQL command. Okay, I do some mistake. Let's you forget this or this. Let's say this is the keyword. So from, you forgot to write this from. Okay, so compiler will forgive it because ultimately compiler is looking for that you are passing a string and you are still passing it. But at the runtime, you will see the exception that your statement, SQL statement is not proper. The from is missing. Okay, so be careful whatever you are writing within this string. Now this is the command which you want to execute, but where, which is defined by this connection object. So already we have created connection object. Now we are creating command object. Okay, now how to read the data from the command object through data reader? The first way, first method in which we are not using data set. So through SqlDataReader Object. So this is how you create a SqlDataReader Object. SqlDataReader object name, command object, and in the command object there is one method ExecuteReader, which returns an object of DataReader class. Okay, so this thing is basically, with this object you can read all the data whatever has been returned from this command execution on the database, and you can read all the data now through this object. Is it clear, guys? Okay. Okay, so here we discussed about SQL Data Reader. So it is providing method properties. So there will be different method and properties which will provide forward only stream. Forward only stream is, it is one-way communication only. You can only read from database to our application. This way communication is only allowed. Not, you cannot update data from application to database. This is not allowed with data reader. Okay. So whenever you are using data reader, parts of the area.NET model are cut out. Which parts are cut out? You don't have to use dataset. You are not wasting memory. There is no data adapter in between. Okay. So it is providing fast and more efficient data access. So practically when you are writing a program and you just want to read once the records written from the data, you want to don't even use the dataset method. It will unnecessarily waste the memory. Okay. So use the data reader method in that case. ExecuteReader method of the SQL command object returns a SQL data reader instance or SQL data reader object. Okay, that is why we are able to write this line of code basically. It is returning the SQL data reader object. Now SQL DataAdapter Object, it provides set of method and properties to retrieve and save data between dataset and database. So it is the bridge between dataset to database. It is two-way. You can fetch from database and you can get from the database both. With the SQL Data Adapter, you can execute the stored procedures as well. Guys, do you know what is a stored procedure? Anyone is there who doesn't know what is a stored procedure? Okay, tell me what is the difference between the SQL query and the stored procedure? Okay, Shobana, tell me what is the difference between SQL query and the stored procedure?
Okay, Shobana, tell me what is the stored procedures. Well, we have this set of, we can write set of queries in stored procedures. We can like insert, update, delete, cursors. We can write in one stored procedures. And SQL only one. SQL is only one. We have only one query.
Okay.
It's actually stored procedure is a pre-compiled one.
Great. So stored procedure. Anyone else who want to speak? What is the difference between the stored procedure and the? That is correct, Kasturi.
In stored procedures, we can do insert, delete, or more than one operations we can do.
So Ramya is writing group of SQL statements. Yeah, that's right, Kasturi. Ramya is writing group of SQL statements that have been previously created and stored in the server database. Okay. So we here you will see how we created our command object. Okay. So this is inline query, SQL query. So here we are writing a SQL query. So as I said, if we do a mistake here, okay. So it will be caught when we actually execute the command. So this command will be executed in the database, and database will throw an error that this SQL statement syntax is wrong, because this is the syntax of the SQL database, right? So SQL database can only say this is the right or wrong syntax. Okay. So while executing will come to know the, oh, that is the mistake. Okay, then we'll again correct it. While we can write this as stored procedure. But where do we write stored procedure? Not in the application side, but here in the database. So we will write here, basically that is created here and compiled also. So if you are writing stored procedure, and within that stored procedure, if you write select category name and you forget to write from, that time database server will not compile this because it has syntactical errors. So until you correct all your syntactical errors, you cannot compile your stored procedure. So it is pre-compiled. Okay. So whenever you have stored procedures, whenever you are executing a stored procedure, so this headache is over, that you can get some compile time errors or runtime exceptions, because at least those are compiled, already compiled. So what is good and what is bad? Anyone? What should we use? Shall we use SQL query or stored procedure? What is the better way?
Stored procedure,
Stored procedures. Okay. Why? Okay. Due to the same reason, because it is pre-compiled. Okay. Ramya says stored procedure. Anyone else? Which one is the better way? Better approach? Query or stored procedure?
it's stored procedure for me.
Anyone? Stored procedure. Okay. See, actually there is no answer in black and white. It's like it depends on the situation. Okay. See, it depends on your priority when you are writing a program. So when we are writing a stored procedure, actually our logic is divided in two sides. Some logic is in our application, okay, which is our business logic. Now this logic is also business logic, like we want to select all from database and all, but that is written here in the stored procedure. Okay, so it is basically from the architecture wise, what you had the business tier in the application, and you wanted to keep all the business logic in the business tier. But when you are using stored procedure, it is not there. You are not following this way, that all the business logic in business tier, but some of the logic in your database in form of the stored procedure. So your logic is not at single place, it is separated. Something is in application, something in the stored procedure. While you are writing SQL query, all the logic is at one place, everything is in the application. But again, the pros of SQL stored procedure that it is already compiled, and another thing, in the stored procedure you can write multiple SQL queries statements within a single stored procedure. So both has pros and cons. It depends on the situation and it depends on your priorities. What do you want? Okay. So many developers, they don't want to keep their logic separate in the database, so they prefer SQL query. So it is your choice. It is the need of the program. Okay. But from the performance wise, if you are writing your SQL query statements within the stored procedure, it is a better choice because it will be faster. Okay. So with the SqlDataAdapter object, we can access or we can execute basically stored procedures as well, which we cannot do through the DataReader object. It connects the database to fill the data set and update the database. Okay, so today from the database we can fill our data set. From our data set we can update the database. Okay, what SqlDataAdapter will contain? One thing is SqlCommand, what you want to actually execute on the server, and another thing on which server, the connection. Okay. Now with this DataAdapter method, we don't have to open a connection explicitly. We don't have to use connection.open method. Whenever you fill the data set with the DataAdapter, it will first open the connection automatically. Okay. So this is we call the disconnected architecture or structure, basically, not architecture, disconnected structure. Always from the application to database, always connection is not open. Okay. But you are opening it when there is a need. When the need is done, you are closing the connection automatically. Okay. So this is what the disconnected structure is provided through the DataAdapter. Now dataset. Now ultimately whatever communication we are performing through DataAdapter, we are holding in our application side at the dataset. So dataset is like, who are familiar with ASP, in ASP we had the report file. It is quite similar to that, but more functionality is there. It represents a cache of data that contain tables, columns, relationship, and other constant also, just like a database. So it is just has a structure of database, exact. Regardless of where the data source comes from, the data can be placed into dataset. Okay. So any data source you are using Access, Excel, XML, SQL Server, Oracle, anything you are using. Ultimately, whatever records you are fetching, you can hold those records in the dataset. It can track the changes that are made to the data before updating the source data. Okay, so with the dataset we can update also in the database. So let's say I have a database, I have a student table, I have name, and let's say email. Okay, I have 3 records here, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so first what I did, I fill my dataset. So I call ds.fill, sorry, da.fill. Through the DataAdapter we call fill, and I fill in the dataset. Okay, now my dataset, it will contain 3 records, okay, and 2 columns, exactly like your name and email. And there will be the state of the row. Okay, so this is, each row is an object of data row class. Okay, and it has a property, maybe it is a data row state or it is just state, I don't remember the name. It has a property which keeps track on the data row state. Okay, now let's say you added one more row here, one more row, 4th row, something. Now you want to do the other way communication, whatever you have added here, you want to update in the database. Okay, so from this data set you want to update in the database now. Okay, so what you do, you call update method. Okay, this will update from the data set to database. But how? it will keep track on the state. It will say this state will be newly added, okay, or updated, whatever the state property name is. So it will only add this row to the database. It will not completely add the entire data set, but only the newly updated or newly added. How? Because each row's state is being tracking, so it knows which is the newly added or the newly updated. Okay. Now data sets are fully XML featured. XML featured is from the XML you can get everything in data set. From the data set you can update to the XML as well. So it is working with all the current models, flat database, relational database, hierarchical database. So all the databases it is able to work with. Anyone, any question here? Okay, so now we actually will write the program now and we'll see how we are accessing the database. Now just for the sample, I have created a database. Name is something and a table is there with 2 columns. Okay, let me open it. This is the name of the database .NET Training tables, and there is only one table, so we'll just work with this table. If you will see the design of this table, I have 3 columns: ID, name and location. Name and location both are varchar. Varchar is like string in our application type. We'll see if there are some tables, some data here. Okay, let me remove all this data. Let's keep just one record. Okay, so now, so far there is only one record. Okay, now let's say this data from this table, student table, I want to fetch all the students from the table. Okay, so these will be the steps. First I will create a connection object. Then we'll invoke a command object through the data set, fill the data in the data set. Okay, and then closing the connection. Okay, these are the steps. Now we are fetching the data from the database. Now again there are 2 methods, right, as we discussed. One is which one? Which are the 2 methods when we are fetching the data from the database?
DataReader and DataAdapter.
Sorry?
DataReader and DataAdapter.
Okay, correct. DataReader and DataSet. So first we'll look at the DataSet examples. Okay, so on this page, whatever data I want to fetch, okay, I am using a control which is a grid view control. You will find it in the toolbox under data tab. Here is the grid view control. Okay, so we can use this grid view control. So it is kind of a table. So whatever tabular kind of data, you can bind it here. Now look at this code. On the page load, when I load the page, I want to fetch the data. Okay, so how I'm writing the code? First is data namespace included and SQL client namespace included. Okay, now first I'm creating an object of SqlConnection class. We are using a dataset method. So I am creating the object of a dataset where we will hold the data and declaring the DataAdapter object. SqlConnection, dataset, SqlDataAdapter. 3 things we are using here. Now start with the connection. So first we have to set what? Connection string. Okay, so you can pass your connection string directly in this connection object dot connection string. Or you can write your connection string here also if you are writing in the page load in the string format. here what I'm doing is, in the entire application, I want to work in all the pages with the same database. Okay. So we want to save our connection string at the common place, and this is the most practical requirement. So in application, we generally have many pages, but ultimately those many pages are interacting with a single database. We don't need generally in different pages a different database. Okay. So we can store our connection string at a common place. What is the common place?
We can store in the web.config file, Tami.
Yeah, web.config file. Okay. So here is the connection string stored. The connection string format which we just discussed, this is the same format. But when you are adding a connection strings here, this is what you have to remember. It is within the connection strings element. So in the connection strings, you can have multiple connection strings as well. So basically, you can work with multiple databases also. Or you can hold multiple connection strings in the web.config file. And each connection string is name, has name, and the value. Value is the actual connection string, which has the parameters, data source, initial catalog, integrated security, user ID, password, if integrated security is false. Okay. So these are two connection strings here specified. So what I want to do is, I want to access this connection string from web.config file. Okay. I'm not hard coding it here in the program, but accessing it from the web.config file. Now to access some elements or any element from your web.config file, this is the namespace you need, system.configuration. Okay. When you include this namespace system.configuration, it provides you the configuration manager class. Through this configuration manager class, you can access the elements of your web.config file. Okay. If you will look at it, ultimately your web.config file is nothing but the XML file. So you are basically reading through the XML file. Okay. Now again look at the code. Now connection string, I am not hard coding. The connection string is the property of connection objects. Connection object dot connection string, I am not hard coding it, but getting it from the web.config file. So configuration manager, connection strings collection, then key. This connection string value will be fetched, okay, with this line of code. Okay, so when we execute this line of code, this web.config value, this will be fetched. This thing, the highlighted one. Okay, so now here in the connection object has been created. Now connection string property is also set. Okay, so connection object is basically ready. Now we are fetching data from the database, but we are using the second approach, the dataset approach. So do we need to create a connection or do we need to open the connection explicitly?
It's not required.
It's not required. Okay. Even though you can, it will not throw any error, but it's not required. Whenever you will use data adapter, it will automatically do this. So there is no need to open the connection. Now the second thing is connection object is ready. Now what command you are executing? Prepare that object. So command object. Okay, Anita, you can leave. So create command object, SQL command object. Now what you have to pass? Which command you want to execute, on what connection you want to execute. Now command object is also ready. Okay. Now you want to execute this command, but through adapter object, because you want to hold the data in the data set, you want to fill the data set through adapter. So adapter object I have already declared here. So adapter, create the adapter object and pass the command. Okay. Now adapter object is also ready. Now when you call this adapter dot fill, now in the fill you can give which data set you want to fill your data in, and the data set is collection of tables. Which table, you can name the table also, you want to fill data in. Okay. So when you call this fill, when this fill will be executed, that time automatically internally the connection will be opened This command will be executed on that connection and through the data adapter object, the data will be filled in this data set. Now actually there is no need to close the connection as well because it is automatically done once the fill is being done. Now the data is available in the application's memory within the data set. But user cannot view the data set. Okay. So now what we want from this data set, in the presentation tier we want to bind the data. So what we are using one control here, grid view control. So what do we need to do is first set the data source property. Grid view.data source, which defines this grid view data source, means this grid view is getting its data from, and this is the source. Okay, so data set dot table 0, the first table. Okay, so this is, you have just set the data source, but the data will be bounded when you actually call the grid view one dot data bound, or sorry, the grid view, whatever grid view, this is the ID in my case, when you actually call the data bind method. Okay, so when you actually find the data bind method, the grid will, you will see whatever data is there in the data set table, you will see it in the grid view. Are you guys getting it? Okay. Now let's execute this. So in the page load, connection string, now you can see the property connection string. What connection string we have set in the web.config file. You can see it. Okay, so here you can see the data set, and if you want to check the data has come into the data set, this is how you can debug also. It's a quick watch. Okay, I will show you how to debug later on. First let me finish this execution. Now the data is here in the data set. Now bind it to the grid view. Grid view is added on the page, which you can see. Okay, so automatically whatever columns, whatever records you fetched from the table, the same structure your data set table took. So your data set table automatically took the same structure with the exactly 3 columns and 1 record, and the exactly same structure you can view in the grid view. Okay, everyone getting it? Any question here? Guys, this is a very, very important thing. Any question, please ask. Don't even keep a single doubt. This is very important. You are going to always use this. Shubha, Shobana, are you guys getting it?
Tanvi, I just had a doubt, like if we are using more than one tables.
More than one table?
Tables in the data set.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, so if we are using more than one tables in the data set.
More than one tables in the data set, right?
Yeah, so like is there any way we can get the index of like where the like suppose we want to know which index the table belongs to.
Right, right. So it will be automatically, see, when you are executing this kind of query, I will tell you what, or maybe tomorrow I can show you the example, because what examples I have already written, but we will use it in the transaction processing. I will show you that example that time. But what we can do is, let's say you have a stored procedure. In the stored procedure, you have two statements. Okay, it's a select all from some, select all from some other table. Okay, say student, let's say marks. Okay, so ultimately when you will execute this in your database, you will see two tables. One will be your student table, another one will be your this table, the marks table. When you will fill it in the data set with the DataAdapter.fill DS, automatically the first records fetched, okay, will go in the DS.tables 0. The second will automatically go in the DS.tables 1. It will go on sequentially.
Okay, in the sequence, the queries are...
The records are fetched.
Okay.
Okay, so first this is executed, then this is executed. So when you will execute this entire stored procedure on the server, you will also see the first this is fetched, then this is fetched. So in the same sequence, this will be added to the first table in the collection. This will be added to the second table in the collection. Is grid view is the only way to display the table content? No, Shubha, you can display it in wherever you want. Okay, so grid view I am using because I want to display all the columns like a table. Okay, but let's say you want to display only names in a drop down list. So you can display it in the drop down list as well. Okay, so I am getting 3 columns, fetching 3 columns, ID, name and something else, whatever is there. I want to only add those name column, all the names in the drop down list. This is possible. Any control you can use it. You can add it in the data list also, list box. But again, data list and list box also, you will have to add only 1 column.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, data grid is another control, which is a table. So you have multiple columns, multiple rows, so you can bind it to the data grid or the grid view. But we generally use, or practically in the real-time situation, we generally use grid view because it has many functionalities inbuilt, like paging, sorting. So you can you can perform these things very easily through grid view.
Okay.
Okay. And guys, give me a second. I'll be back. Yeah, guys, I'm back. Okay, anything else? Any other question? Okay. So display or fetch data from database to application using DataAdapter dataset method. So this is done. Now what we are doing through the same method, DataAdapter along with dataset, same method, we are updating the data into the database. The other way communication. So how we can use this? I have another button here on the add row button. There is some button where I am adding a row in the database. Okay. So you can see on the button I am doing this. Now what you have to do is first you want to add a row in the database through the dataset method. So first you have to add the row in the dataset. Okay. So in the dataset, each row is what? An object of data row class. Okay. Now this is what you are writing. Data row dr equal to ds.table0.new. Okay. So in the same data set, so first we fetch the data, whatever is there in the database. So we have whatever rows there. Okay, in my case it is one row only. So we got this one row, ID 1 and name the. Okay, now we want to add one more row in the database. So first we will add it to the data set. So we want to add a row like this. Okay, but we want to add a row which will follow the same structure that it will have also two columns. It will also have two columns like this data set. So this is how you can create a row to the data set. So DS tables, first we are creating row only for the first table dot new row. So it will create a row like this, but there is no data in it. Now you have to add the data in the columns. Okay, here I am hard coding it. In the DR1 something is there A1. In the DR2 something is there A2. Okay, these are basically two columns. The first one is ID, so it is 0, 1. So location, name and location. This is location. This is 0 column, 1 column, second column. So here this is auto incremental, so it will be automatically incremented in the database. Here I am adding something, here I am adding something. Okay, so you are not doing this 0 because this is auto incremental columns, the first column in the database. So you have to only add the data in the second column and the third column, which is indexed by 1 and 2. Okay, so this data row is ready, object is ready, but it is still not added to the rows collection. So you have to again add this data row object to the rows collection. So ds first table rows add any collection. This is what the general method is add, and you can see it also after typing this dot and add the data row object. Okay, so data row is created. You can name the table also. Instead of the index, you can name the table also. So I am just naming it with the student. In the data set, the first table I am providing the name student. Okay, these are the things which are hard coded. Let's say you want to add a row which user types on the form. So on the form you have a name, you have a location. Okay, so what you will do? Name text box, txt name dot text, txt location dot text, and add. So when you click on add, this data new row will be added in the database. Here I am just hard coding for the demonstration. Okay. Now how to write a SQL command here? SQL command insert into student. Now this time not a select query but the insert query. Insert into student. I want to insert in the name column. This is the column in the database. Second value is the location column in the database, and these are the values passed as parameters from the application. So two parameters. Parameters in database always starts with @. So @, this is a parameter name, another parameter name. So this is the SQL statement, but still something is not completed. What these parameters actually are. So we have to initialize definitely those parameters, and this will be executed on this condition. Okay, so command object is ready. Now we have to add these two parameters. So command object parameters collection add. First parameter, type of that parameter, length of that parameter, and the value of it. So when you give something in the double column, this will be the column name in your data set. So now I have a data set also. In the data set also same structure, ID, name, location. Okay, so I am providing, for this parameter I am providing the location column. Second parameter, name, data type, length, and column name. Okay. Now DataSet will automatically only add the new added rows, not all the rows, because existing rows which we fetch from the database, those will not be again added. It is already there. Okay. Now we have to set that this command object is the insert command. So object adapter dot insert command property we have to set. This is the insert command, and then we have to call object adapter update. Where we want to update? From where we want to update? From this dataset student table. Okay, so whatever new added row is, it will be automatically updated in your database. Getting it, guys? Is this code clear? So let us execute it. So here I have two columns, name and location. First, go to the page load, fill the data in the data set. Already there is some data. We are now on the add row, and I click here on the add row. This, I should have done on the post by again. Now on add row, adding a new data row, setting the values in the columns, adding it to the collection, providing a table name, creating command object, adding parameters, and calling the update method. So the row which you added here in the data set from the application you can see it is added here. This is coming 17 because there were 15 to 16 more records which I have already deleted. So it is the 17th number. So here if you refresh the page, on the page load we are again fetching the data. If you refresh the page, you will see now one more row will come. Okay. Getting it, guys? Any question? Okay, Rupa, Shobana, Shobha, any questions?
This can be similar to DBC, but so many different comments are here. So I think I need to practice.
Now what you can do is, once you completed your form designing, okay, first do this assignment. Because your form which you have already designed with the radio button checkbox, there is a long form. So you may have difficulty inserting data in the database who are not very experienced. So first you can do this. You just do these two things on a page. Make a form. On a page you add just name and just let's say email. Let user type it. Okay. Put two buttons on add whatever user types in, and on get whatever is already there, or get all. Okay, in the database. So first you do this with a small form, only two text fields, name and email. Then later on, once now you're comfortable using these classes and objects, then the previous form which you designed for the employee, then regarding that form you can do the same thing on the add all these data, which one is collected in the database, name, email, phone number, everything. Okay. So first do this, and then if you are done with it, then do this. Okay. Now the same thing which we have done today with the DataAdapter Object, DataSet, the same thing can be done with the command object directly without using DataSet in between. So that is the faster way. If we don't want to store the data, we should use that way. We can update also with that command object directly without dataset, which we'll see tomorrow, day after tomorrow on Thursday. The advantage of using this method of update is when you have bulk update. Okay. Say when you want to insert 50 rows in the database. Okay. 50 rows in the database. So what you can do is you can write a for loop to the command object without using dataset. You will have to execute query on the database in the for loop, which will run 50 times. So again and again it will go to the database and execute query, again go to the database, execute query. For each and every query, this will happen. So in that case, this method is a better choice, because what it does, you don't have to go again and again to the database to execute query, but in a for loop, instead of executing command on the server, directly database server, in the for loop, you add 50 rows here in the data set. Okay, so add 50 rows in the application side. Then with just one update, all the 50 rows will be added in the database. Okay, so this method is good when you have the bulk updation. But if you are adding 1 or 2 rows, or you are updating 1 or 2 rows, then the without dataset method is a better choice, which we'll see later. Okay. So from here, executing the command without dataset directly to the command object will be on Thursday. Any questions, guys, you can ask? We'll see you guys on Thursday. Okay, thank you everyone.
Tanvi?
Yeah, Kasturi.
Yeah, for a Thursday I may join, I may come 10 to 15 minutes late. I'll try to join in the on time. Sometimes it may take.
Oh, okay, Kasturi, no problem.
Thank you, Tanvi.
Okay, thank you, Kasturi. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be